Hello from Seoul, thanks a lot for stopping by, and if you're new here, nice to meet you. My name is Victoria. I live in Korea for over 4 years now, and I do videos about Korean culture, Korean food, and I'm very passionate about Korean cafes. So Chuseok is coming up, a big traditional Korean holiday, one of the big two besides the Lunar New Year, and I often hear people calling it the Korean Thanksgiving, which is not exactly accurate but kind of, so I thought today I will introduce Chuseok to you and tell you about the history, customs, the traditions, and most importantly, the good food. Okay, so starting with the Hanja for Chuseok, it literally means autumn eve. Chuseok is also being called Hangawi, which means the great middle of autumn, I suppose, in Old Korean. Hangawi is a little bit more official and it's often used in media. From my experience, the term Chuseok is a little bit more common, and it's also what we learned at language school. Another name is Jongchujeol, which means mid-autumn day, but that one seems very unknown because even Seongun didn't know it, and he's Korean, so yeah. The holiday is on the 15th day of the 8th month in the lunar calendar, which is a full moon, and it also includes the day before and the day after. And since the date is set according to the lunar calendar, it always varies, but it's usually around mid-September to the beginning of October, and it's also usually around the autumn equinox, and it's celebrating the harvest, and I guess that's also why it's getting compared to Thanksgiving. Many Koreans visit their parents' or grandparents' hometown, and they perform some ancestral rites together, and they have a big feast together. And it's also common to wear a hanbok, traditional Korean clothes that you usually wear for a special occasion like a wedding or the New Year or Chuseok. While researching about the history of Chuseok, I found 3 main origin stories. The first one says that Chuseok is over 2,000 years old and that it originates in Gabe, which is a month-long weaving contest. And the team who would have woven more cloth during that amount of time would be treated by the losing team to a big feast in the end. And on the day of the feast, people would also perform some archery competitions and martial arts demonstrations. Another theory is that Chuseok originates from ancient shamanistic celebrations of the harvest moon, in which new harvests were offered to local deities and ancestors, which probably also included some sort of worship ritual. And then there is also a Buddhist legend about a fox, monkey, and rabbit, and the tale says that the emperor of the heavens disguised himself as a beggar and asked the animals for something to eat. So the fox brought a fish, the monkey some fruit, and the rabbit brought some grass, but knowing that humans can't eat grass, the rabbit decided to offer itself as food, so it lit the grass on fire and wanted to roast itself. Oh my god, that sounds horrible. And the emperor was so moved by the grand gesture of the rabbit, so that he of course stopped the rabbit. No animals were harmed in this history, well, except the fish. And he lifted the rabbit up and placed it on the moon, and that's why with some fantasy you can still see the rabbit on the moon doing some rice cakes. This tale might be one of the reasons why rice cakes are such a staple for Chuseok. The rabbit is also a sign of longevity, fertility, and harvest, so that also fits the Chuseok theme. Chuseok as we know it today is probably a mixture of all. It has elements from all the stories, and it also of course depends on the region. Many Koreans travel to visit their family's hometown for the holidays, which results in epic traffic jams. And no matter when you get out of the city, even at 6 a.m. in the morning, the highways are always jam-packed. So it would be smart going by train, right? Well, train and bus tickets are sold out immediately as soon as they go online. It's probably as hard as getting a BTS or Blackpink concert ticket. Many people also go to a PCbang. There they have fast internet, so they refresh. And then when the tickets go online, then thousands of people are already waiting in line to buy them. Many people also decide to go on a vacation. That's why plane tickets around the Chuseok period tend to get quite expensive. There are three main traditions or rituals that are being performed during Chuseok. It starts with Bulgogi, which usually takes place on the day before Chuseok, and it includes tidying graves, cutting grass, removing the weeds around them. Traditionally, people were buried in grassy mounds, so it demanded a lot of work, and today cremating is more common. The second one is called Chare. On the day of Chuseok in the morning, families hold an ancestral memorial service at their home, and it's a ritual where you make offerings for your ancestors to get their blessing from the afterlife. For this ancestral ritual, people prepare a table with offerings and incense, and it's called umbok. Traditionally, it includes freshly harvested rice cakes, fresh meat, and vegetables. Then once everything is set up, you bow twice towards the table, and there is probably also a photo of your ancestors, usually the one closest to you, and you bow towards the ancestor twice with your head touching the floor. Twice. And then you bow once towards your living family members, and apparently it's the biggest faux pas to bow twice towards them as well. And afterwards you burn a paper with the name of the ancestor written on it. Traditionally, this ritual was performed at the actual graves, but these days people just do it at home. When it comes to setting up the table with the offerings, there are also certain rules that have to be considered. I didn't memorize it, so I will just read it, okay? So the rice and soup are supposed to be in the north, fruits and vegetables in the south, meat in the west and middle, and rice cakes and drinks in the east. I know, I could have also just memorized that, right? Monkey brain. But apparently that also varies depending on the region and also family. And the tendency is also that people don't follow what has to be on the table, and they often just pick food that the ancestor really liked, or some families also go for pizza. Someone told me. A cute thing that some families do is opening the window a little bit so that the spirit can enter easily, or they mimic the ancestor eating the food, so they would put the spoon into the soup or pour some soju. And maybe that's a way of preparing the offerings in general, but they would always cut off the upper layer of the fruit. You always see that. I think it's quite peculiar. And then after the ritual, everyone digs in and people eat either the offerings from the table or eat the same food on another bigger table for breakfast. What an epic breakfast. And since Korea is the land of convenience, some companies also cater Chare food, so people would just go on a vacation and get the ritual foods delivered, do the ritual, and go on with their vacation. It's a lifestyle. The third tradition is called Seongmyo, and it's most commonly the day after Chare, and it's a family visit to the ancestral graves and bowing towards them twice. So little disclaimer here, these are the traditional Korean rituals, but there are also many other religious orientations in Korea that don't perform them, or they perform it from a social or traditional standpoint and don't really believe in it. It's like Christmas, right? Many people who are not religious celebrate it anyway because it's a big part of the culture and capitalism. Okay, now let's talk about my favorite part of Chuseok, which is the delicious food. The probably most iconic Chuseok foods are songpyeon. It's rice cakes in the shape of a half moon, and it's filled with all the good stuff like honey, cinnamon, chestnuts, walnuts, pine nut, red bean paste, and sesame seeds. The secret technique is to steam the rice cakes over pine needles. Well, actually not that secret because song in Songpyeon means pine tree. The next popular Chuseok food are hangwa, and it's an umbrella term for Korean sweets because han means Korea and gwa means sweets. I should do this other way around. It's a traditional Korean confectionery, and they are colorful and patterned and really beautifully made. And there are many more traditional Korean dishes that are eaten commonly during the holidays, like japchae. Japchae is super good. It's stir-fried glass noodles with meat and veggies and some soy sauce and sesame oil, or bulgogi, which literally means fire meat. It's marinated and grilled beef or pork. Also popular is jeon, savory Korean pancakes that come in many variations with potatoes, pumpkin, kimchi, seafood, garlic, you name it, they have it. Another staples are fruits like persimmons. During Chuseok it's persimmon season, and Korean pears that actually look like a big apple, and Korean dates. Common drinks for Chuseok are jindo. It means new rice liquor. Another popular alcoholical beverage is cheongju, which is clear liquor. It's rice wine, and cheongju is traditionally used in rituals and offerings like chare, and it's regarded as a good quality liquor. How to talk about it without getting too worked up about gender inequality in Korea. Okay, let's try. Traditionally, it's the women that were preparing the food for Chuseok. All house chores are given to them and their hard work is taken for granted. They spend hours in the kitchen, and according to a survey, 48.9% of the women enlisted preparing food while my husband is watching TV as the most stressful part of Chuseok. And as a result, women are very stressed out, not only physically but also mentally, and they get migraines, backaches, muscle pain, insomnia, and other conditions. And this phenomenon is known as the post-holiday syndrome. To avoid all the stress, some women fake being sick. Actually, this one is quite funny, or maybe it's just sad. But according to shopping malls, the sales of fake arm casts triple around Chuseok. I guess you can only do that once though, right? Because this will get old. You can't show up with a arm cast every year. Each year, the divorce rate also increases by 11% around Chuseok. But it's not only Korean women that get stressed out about the holidays, it's also hard for young people because they have to endure invasive questions from the older generations. You know, things like, did you get into university? How is the job search going? When will you get married? When will you have babies? I guess this kind of questions are universal, aren't they? So because of all that, and also driving long hours to very remote hometowns, many people are trying to opt out, avoid all that stress by just going on an alternative trip, and I totally understand. In theory, preparing presents for Chuseok is not really expected and necessary, but the custom for exchanging gifts started in the 1960s. Back then, people were sharing daily necessities like soap or rice. But with the rise of capitalism, people are getting more and more extravagant. So today there are fancier gift sets that you can buy. Very common are super overpriced fruit boxes, something that I don't quite understand yet. So you can buy the super expensive apples in a box, but do they taste different than apples that don't come in a fancy box? I don't want to ruin it for everyone, but probably not. And it's actually quite the opposite, because the demand for fruits gets up a lot during Chuseok because of those boxes. And many fruits are being harvested before they are even ripe, so what's the point? You tell me if you know. I guess you can see it as a grand gesture, but I think it's just such a waste of money. So naturally the prices of fruits spike during Chuseok. Anyway, no rants, right? Other gift sets that are very popular and that you also see at all the local supermarkets are gift sets with canned tuna or spam or any kind of ginseng goodies. They are very popular among the older generations because it's supposed to be very healthy. I always want to bake something and contribute to the holidays, so I usually do a pumpkin cheesecake, and Singwon's mom always tells me not to do it. You know, maybe they just don't like it. Maybe I should just get the sign. Fun fact, I recently read that an anti-corruption law has been passed to limit the prices of Chuseok gift sets that people working in the civil service, media, or education can spend and receive. They did it to prevent bribery. That also might tell you a thing or two about Korea. common activity for the holidays used to be playing 정통놀이, Korean folk games. You can take part or watch those games at traditional folk villages or palaces. They often have events during the holidays, but it's not necessarily a part of most Korean families' agenda. That being said, I think Korean folk games are a very engaging part of the culture, and they also have an interesting history, so I decided to include some in this video. For example, 줄다리기. It's a tug-of-war game using an enormous hand-woven straw rope that used to be performed on a large scale. It looks quite fun, and apparently entire villages were invested in this game. Another popular game is Ssireum. It's a Korean version of wrestling, and it's over 5,000 years old, and it's traditionally played on sand. The next one is quite funny. It's called 닭싸움, which literally means chicken fight game. So apparently watching chicken fights used to be a thing back in the days, and the game is inspired by that. So you have to hop around on one leg while holding the other leg with your arm and then knock other people, and when they touch the floor with both legs, then they're out and the last person standing wins. The next one is a dance called Ganggangsulae, and it's a over 5,000 years old dance that is performed by women only, and they dance in a circle while holding hands and singing, and it gets faster with every round. Its purpose was to bring a rich harvest, and it developed into a cultural symbol of Korea. It seems quite fun. I would like to participate, but I would probably also ruin it for everyone. And it's only performed by women, since traditionally women were not allowed to sing loudly or go out at night because of the patriarchal traditional Korean society. But women were allowed to sing and dance by doing the Ganggangsulae at night, so they would sing about their personal hardships, relationships and desires, and give vent to their frustration. And there is so much more interesting history to it. I will link a UNESCO video down below so you can check it out if you want to know more about it. Okay, on a lighter note, the last game is called Huatu, and it's a card game, also known as Go Stop, and it has really pretty cards. I don't know the rules yet, but we ordered a set of the game and I'm looking forward to play it. And I remember in the area where I first lived in Seoul, there was this stream and some older people were always hanging out there playing that game, and it seemed like a lot of fun, so that's why I wanted to try it ever since. Since many locals travel out of the city to visit their family, the city gets really pleasantly empty, and it's a good time for sightseeing, visiting the palaces and temples, or to visit Everland. They often have discounts during the holidays, and there are also festivities at the National Folk Museum or at the Korean Folk Village and Hanok villages like Namsan. At this kind of places they often perform these traditional folk games, and you can also join in some traditional activities or workshops. I'm not so sure about this year, but I'm sure next year this will be an option again. So because of Corona, many families are not celebrating Chuseok this year. That would put the older generations in danger, especially since mostly people from the metropolitan area are going to more rural areas. They could spread the virus because we currently have a second outbreak going on here, but it's getting better. So the government is encouraging the people to stay at home and spend the holiday just in a small family circle. From my experience, Korea is really very good at quickly adapting to a new situation. So some cemeteries and memorial venues are offering an online joint chare, so people can take part in the ritual without visiting, and they also offer grass cutting or grave maintenance at a discounted price. And this year Korean railways are also only selling half of the tickets. So only window seats are available, and the tickets are also not being sold online to prevent people from waiting in long lines for hours. And because of this alternative, some people are torn between not visiting or given to the pressure of the older generation that expect their visit. And according to a Korean online forum, many people hope that the government will impose a level 3 social distancing so that it's not allowed to travel. Okay, so that was a lot of information. Thank you if you watched until here. I really like the holiday because it means that rainy season is over and persimmons are in season and autumn is coming, and autumn in Korea is just amazing. It's my favorite season here. I know I also say that during cherry blossom season, but let's just ignore that for a second. It's also always interesting to spend some quality time with my new Korean side of the family and, you know, just hang out together, relax, eat good food. Seongon doesn't really like the holidays because he always had to pick the ripe persimmons, and he said that there were a lot of spiders and he really hated it. And he also has a dust mite allergy, so he usually couldn't sleep at all while his family was visiting his grandparents. Poor boy. Times have changed, and last year we just spent Chuseok with his parents and it was very lovely. And yeah, I don't know yet exactly how it will look like this year. I think we have to wait and see a bit how the corona situation will, you know, develop. Do you also celebrate some kind of harvest festival in your country? Let me know in the comments. Happy Chuseok, everyone! Thanks a lot for watching and see you next time. Bye!